The issues discussed on the Roll Call Room podcast do not reflect the opinions of any specific agency and are the views of the host or guest only. Any persons discussed may be fictional for comedic purposes. This podcast is rated explicit and listener discretion is advised.
I need an ambulance.
I have you at 9212 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles.
That's room number 2.
What's the emergency?
There's been a suicide.
Who's the victim?
I am.
Today I just found out that I'm worthless.
It's like, it's hopeless. It isn't going to get any better. No matter where I turn, there's no escape. The suffering is unbearable. And I'm absolutely no use whatsoever to anyone. It would be better for everyone if I was just gone. Everywhere I look, it's nothing but catastrophe. And I can't see any way out of it. I can't see any path forward whatsoever.
You are nothing. You are nobody. You don't even deserve to live.
You constantly are told that you're not pretty enough and not tall enough and not skinny enough and people are better. And when you're young, you think that means I'm not good enough as a person.
Black, white. I'm here, you're there, I'm this, you're that. Anytime you have a name, anytime you have a label, you have an inherent division. And the division inherently causes conflict. And the conflict will inevitably cause wars.
We're taught to endure. We're not taught to say habla con todos, or to speak with everyone, or to share what's going on with you, or to talk to me about your life.
If you had heart problems and saw a cardiologist, well, everyone would be concerned about you, would know you're doing better, and it would be open and honest with the crew, anybody you work with.
Weird.
But the most complicated organ in your body, if you have a problem with it, suddenly we don't want to talk about that? No, and you can get over it. And that's what people need to realize. You can be cured. You can get past it. That's what we need to realize.
If you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have any kind of mental health condition, it's nothing to be ashamed of and it's nothing to hide and it's something to hit head on with. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a mental health issue, either with yourself or with somebody that you love.
You know, if you're going through a divorce right now, if you're going through a financial problem right now, if you're going through an illness right now, if you are going through any form of crisis right now. And so I want to share with you, I've gone through a divorce and I've gone through some very painful times. And during those times, they were messy. And during those times, I got off my game at times. And during those times, I was confused. But more than anything else, during those times, I felt pain. Worst thing you can do is what society suggests that you do. Escape, get busy, forget about it, lose yourself in work. Of course you have to work. Of course you have to show up. Your team needs you. Life needs you. Your family needs you. Life is for the living. I got it. But I don't believe that the answer to get through your pain is to escape in your pain. And too many people do that. And I've read the books that say to do that. You can't motivate yourself out of heartbreak. You've got to feel yourself through the heartbreak. I mean, I think it's that old Alanis Morissette song. The quickest way out is in. There are gifts in pain. There is glory in pain. That's how you develop the bravery. That's how you develop the humanity.
Do not latch on to your depression. Do not personally identify with your depression. See it as you see winter, and winter always leads to spring and summer again. See it as you see nighttime. Nighttime becomes daytime again. See it as you see the breaking down and the building up of your body, catabolic, anabolic. It is a process that's natural for spiritual evolution and physical evolution in the world.
There's one thing that if you did every single day, no joke, it would make an extraordinary difference in whatever mental health issue you're struggling with, and that is exercise. Is you've got to exercise every day. And the reason you've got to exercise every day is because what we know about human beings is that when you physically move, your physiology changes, and that changes your brain. Getting your heart rate up, getting outside, breathing, feeling connected, getting out of your house, which may make you feel depressed and trapped. Doing that every day, that physical push. You don't have to run. You don't have to go to an aerobics class. Get outside with your dog in the woods. Walk with a good friend for 2 or 3 miles. Doing that every single day not only moves your body, which changes your mind, it gets you out of your physical environment, which is one of the things that people with depression tend to have a hard time doing, and it also creates a bit of momentum and a bit of a routine in your life. You take on just that single thing. Get outside and exercise every single day as if your life depends upon it, because you know what? It does. Your brain needs it, your body needs it, your mental health needs it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Roll Call Room podcast. And now, your hosts, Nick and Mike.
The following is a blog entry written by Detective David Baumhover. PTSD. No, you're not crazy. In this post, I'd like to set the record straight about what PTSD is and that you're not weak, crazy, or inadequate if you have it. I'm not an MD or mental health professional and don't claim to know everything about PTSD, but here is what I've learned so far. PTSD happens as a result of an actual change in your brain, which is caused by a traumatic event or events, which is why you can't control it, and it's not your fault. The 3 parts most affected by trauma are 1. The thinking center, prefrontal cortex. This area is responsible for rational thinking, problem solving, empathy, etc. If you have a teenager in the house, you should be familiar with this part not working correctly. Number 2. The memory bank, hippocampus. This area files things away in your mental hard drive. When you're overwhelmingly traumatized, this part may code events incorrectly, thus causing memory issues. The thinking center and memory bank typically work closely together. Number 3. The fight or flight calculator, amygdala. As a first responder, you're likely familiar with this part. When your brain is subjected to trauma, the amygdala, fight or flight calculator, is activated more than the other 2 parts. Symptoms of a hyperactive amygdala and PTSD are closely related and include chronic stress, guilt, anxiety, irritation, vigilance, fear, and lousy sleep patterns. Other symptoms of PTSD are brain fog or not being able to think clearly, and the inability to control emotions. If these symptoms seem familiar, then it's time to put yourself in check. The point of therapy, such as EMDR, is to rewire and retrain your brain to effectively use all 3 areas more normally. In layman's terms, it helps to reconnect the parts of your brain that help you dump a memory correctly. My personal experiences with PTSD symptoms were no different. I also suffered from physical manifestations caused by stress associated with PTSD. Some may argue that doesn't happen. Well, they're wrong. Simple as that. Not long after Watt's sentencing hearing and cleaning up the case file, Christmas break was upon us. As a family, we typically go somewhere during this time just to get away from work and be in a warmer climate. As an avid classic car restorer and builder, I chose to spend half of the break in my garage
in an attempt to decompress while my wife, Lori, and youngest daughter went on to Arizona. After working the Watts case every day for months, I was hoping that getting back to my hobbies would put some normalcy back in my life. While at home those few days, I noticed a bald spot on the top of my head that was about the size of a nickel. I didn't think much of it, as I believed it was the result of a welding spark landing on my head and burning my hair. When I arrived in Arizona 3 days later, I asked Lori to look at the spot. I was concerned because it didn't really feel like a burn and felt too smooth. She agreed it was weird, but said not to worry because my hair grows like a weed. Regardless, I wrote it off as a burn spot and didn't think too much about it. Being in Arizona those few days was nice, and I had regret for not going the entire trip. The climate and change of scenery was a good distraction. Getting away from everything felt rejuvenating, and when I returned to work after the New Year's holiday, I was ready to go. Or at least I thought I was. In reality, when I returned to work, I couldn't get into gear or focus on anything. I felt scattered and unable to concentrate. I knew part of the reason was because I didn't know the why part of the case and was having difficulty settling with that realization. Today, I know the main reason for my inability to concentrate was due to post-traumatic stress, aka shell shock. Well into January and February, the bald spot on my head slowly grew in size, and I knew it wasn't a burn spot. I continued to ask Lori to look at it. She took a picture to assure me it appeared as if new hair was sprouting in. By the time I went to Wisconsin in February, the spot had grown to about the size of a quarter. I began to wear a baseball cap everywhere I went because I was becoming self-conscious about it. I also became concerned about my health, as I'd never had anything happen like this before. I decided to go get a blood panel and a checkup to see if there were some underlying medical conditions causing my hair loss. Everything in my workup was normal. After returning from Wisconsin on February 19th, my mental state was beyond shell shock. I thought I was going crazy, but I knew I had to keep it on the down low because it would affect my job status. Prior to the Watts case, I had completed numerous death investigations, including homicides, and they never affected me, less the investigations involving kids. I convinced myself I could handle it, and things would get better over time. When Lori asked me on the morning of February 20th what I was going to tell the Rusiks, the overwhelming wave of emotions included anger, sadness, and disbelief. Similar to how it feels when you suddenly lose someone who is close to you, which I have experienced more than once. Together with those emotions was knowing that what I was going to tell the Rusiks would profoundly hurt them again. That was the last thing I wanted to do, but I promised them I would tell them what Watts said. On one wall of my office, I had a large whiteboard I used to outline to-do items for my larger cases. After we arrested Watts, this whiteboard filled up with tasks I needed to complete. After Watts pled guilty, I erased the whiteboard as part of closing the case file. On February 20th, or the morning of the 21st, the actual time is fuzzy to me, I was in my office when I noticed the whiteboard was full of the same to-do items I had erased. I now know it was not, and I was experiencing one of many image flashbacks I'd had since the night of the 18th in Wisconsin. Fortunately, this one is less intrusive. More about flashbacks in a later post. I came to the realization that something wasn't right, and I should probably talk to someone about it. Not being able to keep control of my emotions was new to me, and it was scary that I couldn't. I sat in my office long enough to think about how I was going to minimize the issue before I spoke with the commander. I finally walked into his office and told him I thought I should talk to someone to help me process this case because I was having difficulty doing it alone. He was on it immediately, and my first visit occurred on the 21st. On my way to see my therapist, I told myself there is no way I'm going to open up to this lady unless I trusted her, and that was going to take a while. That's true to a degree, but when I walked in that day and she asked what was going on, I completely lost it. I couldn't control my emotions in front of a complete stranger, and I felt embarrassed, weak, and out of control all over again. I don't remember what we talked about that day, but I do remember feeling as if some of the pressure was off, and I could literally breathe better. The following weekend, I came down with a cold or something similar. It was the first time I had been sick in years, and it caused me to miss the entire next week of work. Around this same time, depression set in, and I wasn't coping well. I had no desire to work or do anything but sleep and lay around the house, all while dealing with an uncontrollable wave of emotions. Over the next couple of weeks, I requested to continue with some time off work. I figured just being away for a while would get me back to normal. During this time is when I really understood why people who deal with mental health issues commit suicide, and that realization was frightening. Although I began to understand suicide, there were 2 reasons I never went any further with the thought. First, I've investigated numerous suicides in my career, which included death notifications. I would never put my family through the pain I've witnessed many times when I told someone their loved one had taken their own life. Second is my hatred for the evil that lives in people like Watts, and I'll never let it beat me. The evil that lives among us takes pride in destroying people, but it can kiss my ass. The last week of March was spring break, and we had previously planned a road trip to Arizona. Remembering the rejuvenating yet short December trip, I was looking forward to going. Logically, I knew I had to pull it together and get out of the dark place I was falling into. While in Arizona, we met some friends at a restaurant. I don't recall the name of it, but there were many types of exotic birds in cages all around. Looking at the birds was interesting and a great distraction while we waited for a table. About the time we were being seated, a family walked in behind me. When I heard the voice of a little girl, I turned around and saw 2 girls nearly identical in size and proportion to each other, as Bella and Celeste. My anxiety level spiked immediately, and as I walked past them to leave the restaurant, I began to have the same feelings I had experienced in my hotel room in Wisconsin on the eve of February 18th. Vivid images of Bella and Cece were going through my head, almost like a slideshow. After I calmed down a bit, I realized I was outside and thought everyone was probably wondering where I went. I started back into the restaurant and wrote the experience off as just another bad memory. I remember beelining to the table and avoided looking at anyone in the surrounding area. The table was situated near the back of the dining room, and I sat with my back to the crowd. This in itself felt conflicting with my back to a door and people I didn't know. Although I was cognizant of this, I was more focused on what was going on in my head. About halfway through dinner, I heard voices of who I presumed to be the same 2 girls who were now seated at a table behind me. The place was loud, so I could only hear them when they spoke over the crowd noise. I zoned out for a bit as I began to recall the videos Shannon had of the girls on her phone. It was the only time I had heard their voices. Lori reeled me back into a conversation at the table, and I tried to engage, but all I really wanted was to get away from that area as my anxiety level was climbing. As we were getting ready to leave, I noticed them again, and my anxiety was in the red. I don't recall much after that other than what I describe as a videotype flashback, and Lori opening the passenger door of the car for me. All I wanted was to go home and be away from people. It wasn't long after we returned back to Colorado when I was diagnosed with PTSD and put on official medical leave and workman's comp status by the brass. Not long after that, the associated stress physically manifested. The bald spot on my head getting larger, coupled with feeling sickly, caused me to see the doctor who did the blood panel workup, and also referred me to a dermatologist for my hair loss. After a few expensive and ineffective steroid injections in my scalp, my hair continued to fall out in patches. At the time, I figured I'd be out of work for only a few weeks, and was concerned about being in court looking the way I did. The photo below shows my hair at the sentencing hearing, and the remaining photos are pretty much self-explanatory. Rapid weight loss accompanied my alopecia, and it didn't take long to drop 30 pounds, weighing in around 145 pounds at one point. Today, nearly a year later, both my hair and weight are back to normal, but I struggle with other symptoms associated with PTSD. As first responders, we're used to fixing things and moving on to the next problem to fix it. The realization of not being able to fix this when I thought it should be was difficult to accept. I'll stress again the importance of taking care of your mind if you're exposed to trauma. If you're repeatedly exposed to it, you're at a higher risk, but one event, like the Watts case, can cause PTSD. In the cop world, think about all the other people involved in your case or event. People like prosecutors, forensic interviewers, medical examiners, and of course, your family. The brass of many agencies are taking notice of this, but others aren't. It's time to fix it.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of the Roll Call Room. I am your host, Nick. Mike is not in studio today. Pretty excited about this particular bonus episode. I have a really special guest that's agreed to come on. Dave, welcome to the show. Dave, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Dave Baumover. I am a detective for the Frederick, Colorado Police Department. Currently on medical leave, but still employed as a detective there.
All right. So short backstory is I'm always researching, always looking for folks that are talking about PTSD, folks that are talking about officer wellness, specifically some stuff that I've gone through on the job, not nearly as much time on as you have, Dave. And I came across your blog, which is mental-armor.org. And I was just absolutely blown away by the stuff that you're blogging about, because I think it's extremely important for folks to hear. So I just want to tell you, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So how long have you been on the job?
About 20 years altogether. I've had some off and on periods, went back into civilian life and, for a few years. But, as the police work is, it draws you back. So, came back and that's where I'm at. So about 20 years total. Started in 1986 as a cadet. Yeah. So that was my first police gig was literally right after high school as a cadet at 18.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And then right into, I would imagine, patrol officer.
Yeah, I did some patrol and then worked detentions, did gang intelligence. And then finally, the last 6-7 years has been investigations.
Okay. Primarily homicides and stuff like that.
Well, at Frederick, because being a smaller agency,
it's all encompassing.
Yeah, it's all encompassed. You don't work one set of cases or the other, so you get everything. It doesn't matter if it's an SA case or a fraud case or a homicide. I'm also part of, obviously still on hold, or everything is on hold, but I'm also part of the 19th Judicial CERT team, the RAT team, which is a task force, auto theft task force.
Oh, wow.
And then I was also part of the Child Fatality Review Committee, which is like a state mandated team. So all of that is part of my investigations background.
Wow. So a smaller department, not really familiar with the size, below 200, above 200.
Oh, well below 200. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Actually, at the time, there's more now, but at the time of this case, there was 20 officers.
Wow. 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
20, yeah.
Well, this falls right in because I get a lot of emails from folks that are like, when are you going to talk about smaller agencies? And I'm in an agency that's got, like 315 sworn. And that, to me, coming from the NYPD, is very small. So hearing somebody with 20, wow, that. No wonder you're kind of catching cases as they come along. So that makes a lot of sense. So Dave, what brings you on the show?
Well, I think we have a common goal, and that's to bring awareness to the mental health concerns surrounding first responders. And I want to try to get as much exposure as I can, mainly to reach out to people that may just read what I'm writing and, and just think, holy shit, that's me. And then maybe do something about it rather than just wondering if they're going crazy or whatever the issue may be.
Yeah, and I will say, reading your blog, that has happened to me a couple of times. Like reading your blog, I've I've experienced some of the stuff, not in the large amount that you have, but it definitely is something that folks do need to read, because there are warning signs. There are things that you see that are pretty traumatizing on the job, and you don't realize you're not going insane. It's just it's just your brain is just experiencing PTSD. So when you were on the job, what was the importance of self-care early on? In the 80s, early 90s, I'm sure there wasn't very much uh, self-care promotion going on, I would imagine.
No, there was not. In fact, it was just the opposite. In the 80s, the culture was, we don't talk about it, and, you just deal with it and move on. Whatever that was. And usually that was just basically cramming it down, choking it down, whatever. And you never talk about it.
Yeah.
That's, and growing up in this profession, that's the way it always was with me, with the exception of the last couple of years, maybe, I guess.
Mostly supervisors or commanders saying, suck it up, move on. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, or the officers, you work with. That was just the culture. You didn't, if you had an issue with something, or you're having issues with a call, you just dealt with it on your own. You didn't discuss it with other officers.
Right.
At least I was. And so there was nothing then, but as early on, I think going forward, obviously from here, the important thing is, obviously don't let things build up. And which is what I did, and which is why I am where I am now. And you speak to someone, even someone anonymously, if you have to, about some of the crap you just dealt with.
Right.
It's better than holding it in. It does, whoever. If it's a peer support person, which is great, that that a lot of those teams are coming together, and so you can speak to someone you trust and then someone you work with, or colleague. I think that's great. I think that's that is important. Number one is what that is. Just talk about it, rather than just cramming it down and swallowing it, and it doesn't work.
And you experienced that like later on in your career. Big case. I'm sure folks are gonna, Google your name or Google who you are. Big, huge case. Very, very large exposure. A lot of eyes. At the time going through it, self-care, I'm sure, was not on your mind at the time, I would imagine.
It definitely was not. And in fact, there was a debrief. It was actually the day of the autopsies, and there was no way I was going to go to that for obvious reasons. And so there was a second debrief, and where we get everybody gets together, and you get the trauma counselors in, and just to tell you what to be aware of, what to look for, those types of things. But even at that point, like many of previous conversations that we've had, all I wanted to do was get out of the room and go back to work.
Right.
And then especially in this case, and there was just so much to do. And the last thing I wanted to hear was somebody tell me about take care of your mental health. Because I was more concerned about the family, than I was my own mental health at that point. And that was my focus.
Yeah. And then compassion fatigue starts to set in too, because you're trying to absorb the pain and suffering from the family that you're trying to get justice for, I would imagine, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So, case is over, case is adjudicated. At what point are you? I know folks that read your blog will understand what I'm talking about. There comes a point where you're like, I got to take care of myself. I mean, was it a profound moment where you were like, something's obviously wrong, where I need to decompress. I need to talk to somebody.
Yes. And it was after for the listeners, it was the Watts homicide case. And it was after the February 18th, I guess, interview or meeting we had with him up in Wisconsin. It was later that evening is when things went really bad for me. And but they were along the lines. There were little signs, little things. They were kind of picking at me because for a while I really wasn't understanding what was going on. There were flashbacks I was having, and I didn't know what it was. And I didn't, prior to this, I never believed in PTSD. I thought that was just a term for people that were too weak to do the job. I didn't, that was just how I mean, that's what I grew up with. If you didn't, if you weren't strong enough, then get out. Obviously today, I don't think that at all.
Right.
Because, when they tell you it sneaks in, and it does, it sneaks in and gets you. There was a point where I finally realized that this wasn't just going to go away with a little bit of time. And I finally walked in to my commander and just told him I having difficulty processing this case now that it's over, and I just maybe need to talk to somebody about how to get through it. I minimized it, what the issues were and the issues I was having. And I just, for obvious reasons, I didn't want to, disclose what was all going on at that time. So,
and they were pretty understanding, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The town's been great. But this whole thing, very supportive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing right now. The issues that we're having in this profession is that we need to mimic like your agency's response to you coming forward and getting help, because I think the majority of the agencies that are out there I don't think they really know how to handle that when somebody walks into your office and says, "Hey, I'm not doing real good right now."
Right.
Your advice to an agency that's struggling with that, what would your advice be to them?
As far as the whole agency struggling with that?
Yeah. What would, your recommendation for somebody that comes forward and says, "Hey, listen, I just got done working a pretty major case, or not even a major case, just a scene that was just some trauma involved with it." What would your advice be to the sergeant or the lieutenant or the captain listening to this? What would be the advice that you would give them that was comforting to you to hear while you were going through that?
Well, for me, it was my experience. For me, was the commander, my commander, who I talked to. I've known for years. We worked together for years, so I kind of knew what to expect from him. But in a larger agency, you may not know that. So I would recommend that a sergeant just really be open minded about that, and just understand that if somebody has come to a point where they say, "Hey, I need some help," the odds are they've probably been dealing with it for a while, and it's to the point where they're going to say, "I need that." Be cognizant of that, because that's a very difficult thing for anyone to do, and especially us cops.
Yes.
And if they're at that point where they're asking you for help, they're reaching out to you, as their supervisor, it's up to you to make sure that you respond to that correctly, with an open mind and some compassion and empathy. And I think the generation is getting that way, or is turning that way. But clearly it's not everywhere.
No. Not with the numbers that we had last year.
Right.
Blue Help puts up on their website daily an update of law enforcement suicides, retired and current, and you can just see the numbers are just right now. We're on a path of exceeding last year, which is pretty scary. So the good thing is that like the DOJ is finally getting involved, and Blue Help is being called upon to come up to Capitol Hill to start making some policy changes, which is good. I mean, it's definitely, like you said, the culture is changing, because I think the demographics are changing, or the age group is changing that is coming into this profession. I don't think they're so much afraid to come forward and say, "Hey, I'm not doing real well." So That's a good sign.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, and I think it's great. I really hope it has an effect on the numbers. I think we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? What's your day to day now? How are you doing?
So I'm an avid car restorer and builder, and I play a lot with that. The writing of the blog that took a lot of time getting that started, and I take a lot of notes and start journaling things that go through my mind, and the memories that actually were extracted, if for lack of a better term, through EMDR, things like that. And that's just things I start to I write a lot now just to do that. And then the journaling, or writing a journal, I should say, kind of helps clean that out, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's part of the reason for the blog, is for my own self-care at this point, and
get it out.
Yeah, get it out. EMDR is a great thing, and I'm also doing exposure therapy for triggers. But
and you're the second person. We had a young lady on from Texas. She was in studio. She works for sheriff's department in Texas, and she said the same thing about EMDR, and nothing but great things to say about it. So you're the second person I've heard that's actually used it. So definitely recommended.
Yes. Yeah. It works great for me. Just like anything else, we're skeptical when we first go into anything. And I was, I was very skeptical of EMDRs. Like, what is this hocus pocus?
Yeah. That's us old school cops, Dave. I mean, that's how we are. We're just
but yes, like, okay, I guess I'll put these buzzers in my hand and this is going to fix everything, bullshit.
Yeah.
Whatever,
I was the same way about therapy. Like, I went to therapy and I was like, I'm not laying on a couch. And the lady's like, look around. Do you see a couch? And I was like, oh. She goes, we haven't used couches in 20 years. I was like, oh, all right. So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. That's, well, and the other part of it is, on my way over to see a therapist for the first day, and she's still the same therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I told myself, I'm not telling this lady anything until I can trust her. And, but when I walked in the room and, she asked, I think I wrote that in the blog. She asked, what's going on? I just lost it. I was just right on the edge.
Yeah. So you went at the right time. You really went at the right time. And drawing from personal experience, I was the same way. I waited till the very, very worst time. And I was the same way as you. It's just us old school cops were just like, I'm not talking to this person. I don't even know who you are.
Right.
Walk in there, and all she had to say was, how are you doing? And I was just like, she's got the magic password. So, and then all of a sudden, then it's, 40 minutes of just nonstop gibberish. And, and I sleep like a baby. The days I go to therapy and the days that we film stuff, like when we tape a full episode, like you said about writing stuff down, this podcast is kind of my writing down. It's my kind of debrief. So I can definitely relate to that. I can definitely relate.
That's great. Yeah.
So new advice for a new officer coming on. We kind of touched on it a little bit before, but let's say I'm a brand new officer. I've got, green. I'm very, very green. I'm 22 years old.
Yeah.
Just into the, I heard you laugh, but that's the fact. It's all 22, 23-year-olds now. And I want to conquer the world. I want to go out there and solve every crime out there. What's the great advice that you can give to a brand new officer?
Yeah. Calm down a little, right?
Isn't that the truth? Not everybody deserves a ticket. Relax.
Yeah. I guess and I've actually said this to some of the new officers coming in when I was a detective active, and really what it comes down to is don't talk as much as you listen, and, learn from watching and the experience around you. Don't be afraid to tap into that. And no dumb questions, just dumb mistakes. Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Concentrate on learning everything you can in the divisions of, say, patrol or detentions if you go, for an SO or special assignments, and learn that stuff as much as you can before you ever think about going into a supervisory level. To me, yeah, I mean, you see that anymore. There's guys that come on a few years and then like, oh, I'm going to make sergeant next year, and that's just, you're not there.
At year 4.
I mean, you've got so much to learn. I don't, in the first 4 years, I don't think I learned anything. Really.
No. When I used to field train people, I used to upset the recruits because I would say to them, you're useless on this job for the first 5 years, and they're like, what? And you're like, you are useless. Like, you are going to make so many mistakes the first 5 years. By year 5 is usually when the light bulb goes off and you go, oh, I get it.
Exactly.
That's at year 5. and it doesn't matter what state you're in. It's everywhere. We have 5th-year sergeants, 4-year sergeants that just 4 years on the job. As soon as they're eligible for a promotion, they're putting in for that spot. So it doesn't matter what state you're in. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, they're setting themselves up there for failure, because
and pay-wise too. Pay-wise,
right.
Depending on where you're from, you get promoted too early, you really screw your pension up later on.
Right. Yeah.
That's a whole other issue. That's
right.
yeah.
The other thing I guess I would say is, don't be a tackleberry. Nobody likes the tackleberry kind of guy, that type. And
Tactical Tommy.
Yeah, Tactical Tommy. That's right.
Yeah. They right out of the academy, they buy the newest go bag and they got $400 worth of toys and can't afford to pay their bills. So
right.
Every agency is the same way. I've worked for 2 different agencies, and there's always a Tactical Tommy in every group. Group.
Yes, there is. You're right. I worked for 2 small agencies and 1 large, and that you're right. It's exactly the truth.
It's usually the one that comes into work, not the ones that don't get dressed at home and come in. It's the ones that come in plain clothes and get dressed at headquarters that wear 511s and always a law enforcement sheepdog or warrior t-shirt on their way into work. It's always the same. The same guys. The guys that wear the shirts that say, I got your 6, all these tactical things, canine shirts, but they're not canine. It's the same guys. It's the same.
That's hilarious.
It's the same. It's no matter where you go. You could be in Virginia, you could be in New York, you can be in Colorado. It doesn't matter. It's the same. So now I'll switch it on you even more, which is brand new detective. Got some years under their belt. They're a brand new detective. What's the advice you give brand new detective?
If you have an ego, leave it at the door. And if you need help, you got to be able to ask for help, and when you need it. Some of those cases are just too big, and the Watts case was one of those. I knew the next morning. I knew way before then, but the next morning we still didn't have anything to go on as far as any criminal element. But my gut feeling was like, this is not good. And I called in, the cavalry, CBI and some FBI, and it was just, cause you could kind of tell in your gut, and it's, you got to be able to do that. You have to be able to do that. And so
thank God you trusted your gut with that.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if you have that, well, I can handle this all on my own, then you're going to fail, something that big. So, they want to be a person first and a cop second, keep that empathy and compassion when dealing with people, because you're going to start dealing with people on a whole another level, especially crimes against persons or, death investigations, whatever, whereas patrol, you know how it is, you're in and you're out.
Yeah.
Investigations,
hit and go.
Yeah, exactly. And
go write a report.
Yeah. You get the whole story and you live it for who knows. I've had some cases that went over a year and a half. Before they, just dragging out. Those are usually the big ones that I had, I think 5, and it was a 5 in the last 6 years ended up being life sentences, and those are usually dragged quite a bit. So,
wow. And it's got to be tough to be the family's advocate. Like, you're literally their advocate as the detective. You're the one that's got to vindicate what's happened to their family member. That's got to be a heavy weight on your shoulder. It's got to be.
yeah, and that's exactly. And as a detective, a larger agency's more resources, but it's still going to weigh on you, and no matter what, and you're going to feel that.
Yeah,
and you're going to feel the pain of the family, and if you don't, then you probably shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, and I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine what you went through with that. So, again, I commend you on that. So,
yeah.
So, Dave, I'd love to have you on again when Mike is actually shows up for work and shows up at the studio.
Yeah.
If you've watched this show, I always say that. If you've listened to this show, every bonus episode Mike doesn't come to, so I have to give him crap. So when he's listening to this in his car on his way to work, he can listen to how lazy he is and he didn't show up to work. So,
yeah.
But I appreciate it. You want to let people know again where they can find your blog, what your blog is, and how to get to it.
Yeah, so my blog is at mental-armor.org. And it is a blog. Basically, it's my PTSD story and what happened. As I go on, it's going to be about traumatic events and cases that I've had throughout my career, and how the Watts homicide case was basically the case that tipped the glass for me. And so I just discussed that. And the whole reason for that is just to share my story, that in the hopes that other first responders, and that's not just cops and firefighters, but it's everybody that's touched by these cases, prosecutors, forensic interviewers and judges, et cetera, just to bring that awareness to them, and maybe bring some normalcy to talking about this stuff. I mean, I'm at a point now where I have absolutely nothing to lose. So this is the least I can do for people, is to share my story, and then hope, and somebody reads that and go, holy shit, that's me. That's exactly the same symptoms I'm having. And then maybe we'll do something about it before it's too late,
Yeah. And I will tell you, we said this in the beginning, you already have one, which is me. Luckily for me, I already went to therapy and all that stuff. But with the amount of listeners that we have, there's bound to be quite a few that are going to listen to this or go on to your blog and be like, okay, that's me, and I need to go get help. I will say one thing, I'm going to plug you even more, which is make sure you subscribe on the blog, because when I did that, I got an email right away when you posted the new blog, and I was able to read it on my iPhone. So even if you're mobile, it'll send you an email and say, hey, David's already put a new blog out. Go check it out. You just click the link in your email and it takes you right to the blog, which I thought was super convenient. The other thing is folks, when you're listening to this episode on your radio, I'm going to already have pre-programmed on there David's blog address on there. So you can easily, while your car is stopped, please don't do this while you're driving. I don't condone that. And I'm not responsible for you getting into an accident. You can see it on your radio right now as you're listening to it. So it'll display on your radio. And then furthermore, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at Roll Call Room, the video that I'm going to put up with this audio will actually have the web address as well. So you can, as you're listening to it, you can see what the web address is. David, I want to thank you again so much for coming in. Super brave of you to come on and do this. I know it couldn't have been easy. We've had multiple conversations before this, and I'm very happy that you did. So thank you again for coming on.
You bet. Thank you. I'm glad the word's getting out.
Awesome. All right, folks, check out rollcallroom.com. Subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. And as always, take good care of each other.
Hey, Mike. Super excited about finally being able to tell our fans about our nonprofit. Yep. Super awesome. It's been long overdue. So if you guys know, with all your support, like we said before, you guys are the fuel to our fire. We decided to take it up a notch and take it to another level on a national, more larger grand scale. And we created the Araya Guardian Foundation Incorporated, TAGFINC, tagthink.com. We need you guys to get out here and like and share and like, spread, donate, contribute, so we could take this thing to the next level. We have some major plans for this nonprofit, and it's going to blow you guys away.
Yeah. We're super excited about it, folks. On your radio right now, take a look. That's the website. Log on to it. Spread it on all social media outlets. We'll be divulging some really cool things that we're going to be doing with the nonprofit. We appreciate all you guys out there. Take care of each other, all right? All right, fans, thanks so much for tuning in to another great episode of the Roll Call Room. I want to remind you that we are on YouTube. Go on our YouTube channel and subscribe. We're also on Twitter at Roll Call Room. We're also on Facebook at Roll Call Room Podcast. We're also on Instagram. We're always asking for you guys to go on iTunes and rate us a 5-star with a comment. Helps us climb the charts. Don't forget to check out bluehelp.org. If you're struggling out there and you need somebody to talk to, we'd highly recommend them. Don't forget about our nonprofit, tagthink.com. We got some great shows coming up soon, and we love hearing from you guys, so please email us at nick@rollcallroom.com or mike@rollcallroom.com. And always take care of each other, look out for each other, and check on each other.